kick it in.
Okay.
Hello, my good people. Welcome. My name's Kevin Bowers, and I'm with Isabella Granic. And
Hello.
we are in the midst of, hey there. We're in the midst of doing a, what are we calling it? Like a linked chain of conversations amongst all of the founding members of Liminal Learning. We're kind of all giddy and excited as we're preparing to take our first quest and to take 16 young people into the woods of Algonquin Park. And we've been meeting regularly on Zoom, and one time we met in the woods ourselves. And we thought it kind of like a good idea to, because we all have these passions, we all have these angles that bring us to this place. And I would say that Isabella is the one who gathered us together. She certainly gathered me into this space. And I feel very, a lot of gratitude that she saw something in me that made sense to her for this task. So, Brian, Cam, and I had a conversation less than a week ago, and you may have seen that already if you're following this. This would be the next link in the chain, and it was decided that I would take the reins and have a little conversation with Isabella. And Isabella is a developmental psychologist and a lover of humanity, and cares deeply about doing something about helping young people grow up good. Does that feel right?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, I think there's lots to say about what that means for everybody in different ways. I think, so thank you for hosting these, because I think the idea here of having each of the 7 co-founders of Liminal Learning speak to what lights them up about this endeavor is a beautiful way to sort of launch us into really a discussion of what we're trying to do. And I see it very much as this organic thing we're building together, first of all, the 7 of us, but also with not only 4 young people, but with them as well. And so yes. I think we're in very early stages right now. We have an incredible foundation that I hope we can get into, sort of the scientific principles, the philosophical perspectives and traditions that are the foundation and the springboard from which liminal learning is built. But it's really important to also say that we're hoping and intentionally building ways in which young people themselves will be able to participate in designing what we're creating for them and with them. So it really should feel like something that's co-designed, and more so as we grow and build out and so on. So we can talk a little bit about that structure as we go along.
I love that stuff. You've been very consistent with that from the very beginning, and I'm always happy when you remind me of that sense of co-designing, and I do feel this very strongly, that as the adults in the room, or maybe the adults in the woods, that we are participant. Like, it's not this sort of like generational gap where we have it all figured out and we're just sort of like, we are very keen and eager. And I would say of the the sort of team that we've got here, the this group are all very curious and all very interested and all very sort of participant in this growing. Like, we're sort of figuring it out together. We're sort of playful with it, joyful to be part of it. And I think that a new kind of relationship between these generations is in your design concept.
Yes.
And I think that's really maybe simple and profound. Like, as a teacher myself, it's like, I can't tell you how much I've learned from teenagers just being around. Like I don't really go to the staff room very much. I tend to like hang out with the students and just sort of like, there's so much enthusiasm, and I don't know, like there's a lot of adults in my life, so I feel sort of that the practice and the playfulness of teaching and sort of intergenerational mojo has magic that will benefit both sides.
Yeah. So this speaks directly to what Brian sort of launched us right at the end of your conversation with him, which is about my longtime interest in thinking about developmental transitions in general and in very specific terms. So I have, a little bit about my background. So I was a graduate student in University of Toronto in developmental psychology, and very early on, as I was doing my PhD, I became interested in not only this period of adolescence where there's just tons going on in terms of change, but specifically using ideas from complexity science. And, if you think about chaos theory or self-organization, some people have heard of these ideas, but complexity science gives us this scientific framework by which we can think about transition periods really rigorously. So I have been collecting data for 20 or so years on the kinds of processes that underlie periods like adolescence, as well as middle age, by the way. That's not my data world, but still, it's another good example of developmental transitions, because they're these incredible conduits through which lots and lots of energy is flowing in terms of changes across different levels. So you have biological changes that we all know of as going on in adolescence, but you also have changes in the parent system, and the support system and the relationship starts shifting around a lot. Then there's the peer system that also changes dramatically, and suddenly kids are less looking at their parents for guidelines of how to live and looking at their peers instead. And then, of course, there's the romantic partners that start to come up. And then the institutions around them that have been either supporting them or not are changing dramatically. They're leaving high school. They're going to either another kind of institution, education institution like universities, or they're going into the work context and so on, right? So there are massive changes happening at the very same time across these levels. And to understand how to look at it, not, there's long history of psychology looking at this as a, storm and stress kind of context, where we look at this period as, a period of real risk, and kids are going to do drugs and do, all the bad things are going to be happening in there. But another way to look at this period is that it is potentially an opening for lots of risk, but also a lot of opportunities, because there's so much flux in the system, right? And in all these systems. And so to some degree, liminal learning is built around this principle of get in there and try to change or amplify certain kind of intuitions at a period when things are already more malleable. And so there's the adolescent period, which is really interesting and important to think about. But many of us who are the teachers in this program are going through our own rather exciting transition in middle age, where we have decided, many of us, to change our maybe not vocation exactly, but many of us are changing from this more traditional, conventional period of life where we have accrued resources and done the schooling thing and maybe had a career, and done even a family thing. Some of us have had our kids, etc. And we're moving towards what's new, how do we make meaning now in our lives? And so these two transition periods that are massive out in the world of psychology and so on are coming together in this period in liminal learning, where we can teach one another and navigate together. And for me, and for many of us in liminal learning, this opportunity to go on quests together in the woods, as we'll talk about a little bit more, is an opportunity to create this microcosm by which generations can talk and then collaborate with one another in really meaningful ways that can then launch into the quote-unquote real world and provide this kind of model of collaboration that we wouldn't otherwise have.
Nicely done. Yeah, that feels right. And there's an echo I'm hearing from the conversation we had about prejudging what adulthood might be, and you're sort of bringing it into the transition itself, like going through this change of like from adolescence to adulthood. In our culture, we have so many negative sort of frames for that. Oh, they're, I can't tell you how many people have told me like, oh, working with teenagers, like, it's as if it's this scary sort of like werewolf-esque sort of mystery and this hormonal thing that's going on in teenagers. And it's like, I mean, it's just so wrong, and it's so
just so wrong.
It's so missing the excitement and the cool and the novelty and the there's all of these other qualities, all this moreness to this potential, and this shared framing that we have in our culture, I think, gets both into the teenager sort of sensibilities and gets into the adult sensibilities. We both are looking at each other slightly through this this distorted lens, and what a cool opportunity to sort of say, let's not let those prejudging attitudes or frames in between us. And what an opportunity then for like intimacy with self, and through the generations, and through that we don't need to, we can meet each other where we are, as opposed to the ideas of old people versus young people or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, in all of these meetings that we have, the potential that we have for this week-long quest, right? Going out into the woods, learning about the kind of stories and narratives that have constrained us as individuals, and then societal stories that have constrained us, and how we can rework and reshape those stories so that they can be, more beneficial, more productive, more supportive, more hope-filled and energizing, I think is really important. So part of what we want to do is to model a way of collaboration between the young people so that they find that collective just juice, and create things in the context of liminal learning, the seeds of projects that they can go out and make a real social impact in the rest of the world. And at the same time, find that sense of trust and support with the older generation that is there as well, and so that they can feel like, wait a minute, not everyone is just maligning our entire generation or stigmatizing every time we get on a phone that suddenly we're doing something bad, right? This is all that young people hear right now, is that they're addicted to their phones, that they're depressed, that they're anxious, that they're wimpy, that they haven't learned the kind of strength, skills to be, do well in the world, etc., right? And not only is it bullshit, but more importantly, it's this kind of echoing message that they're constantly having to imbibe and fight. And what a miracle it might be to hear something different, like, hey, you've got this inside of you to like create something entirely different, and we've got your back. Like, we cannot wait to see what you want to create so that we can, support it over the next 12 months is what we're thinking in liminal learning. But
very nice. I'm
excited.
That's part of what I'm so jazzed about, is that it feels like all 7 of these founding members have a narrative that brought them here, that would resonate really harmonically with what you just said, like that we too are dismayed by the bullshit in our culture maybe, and the saddened by the sort of the missed potential in the ways that institutions work, and the ways that the sort of soulful potential of the future just seems so rich, yet the framings of it is so seems to miss so much of what could be. And I feel that way.
Yeah.
And that everybody
I do
shares
too.
that. That's what, like, when you talk to Rick or you talk to, Luke, and there's just this sense of like yearning to engage the better. And I just think that's freaking sweet. Like as a community of as a goal, right? Just to like inject more potential and sweetness and and good into the culture with this sort of skill set like that you're bringing to the table and everyone's bringing to the table. It's just like these are really high functioning, caring people who've decided this is a way to spend all these years of experience. Whatever wisdom might have been gathered, it's like, yeah, this is the place to put it, into
That's right.
reframing and not giving others potential, but participating in the potential of others.
Yeah, I mean, it's what for me is really interesting as I hear people asking me, why did you leave academia and the university context to do something like this? And, the immediate answer is, yeah, this is my calling, but what does that mean? And I think the important thing is that I have a very strong gut feeling and some pretty good evidence that our kind of conventional institutions are failing young people pretty dramatically. And having, reached what career-wise was a peak, right, of being a professor and having massive classes of 800 students, or really amazing, really intimate classes of 12 graduate students and everything in between. And seeing these young people in front of me every day and being able to teach whatever I'm teaching, whether it's psychology or whatever it is, it was really clear to me that these kinds of contexts are no longer serving the way that they used to. So that, for example, universities used to be a context where we could debate and take a lot of time and really think through ideas. And it, especially in the humanities and the social sciences, there were certainly a lot of opportunities to use university context as a time to search for your own personal meaning and your calling, and to figure out how we got to where we got to with humanity and so on. It has become a place where we spend a lot of money to send our kids so that they can get a piece of paper, which is just a kind of capitalist, document that we can then exchange for some kind of position. And so it really started to feel depressing to me, the extent to which not only could I not teach in the way that I wanted to teach or get into the discussions that I wanted to get into with these young people, but because they themselves were stressed out because they had to get the A pluses so that they can have a transcript, because otherwise they've wasted money and so on. But also there wasn't anymore the sense of, we have time now to explore ourselves in this context. And I think we need it more than ever. So, on the one hand, I did a lot of soul searching and thinking like, okay, but when am I ever going to be in front of 800 kids per day again? And we're going to be having 16 per every 2 weeks eventually with liminal learning. Is that enough? But I think, our model around focusing on small groups, small collectives, and going at the rate of trust or relationship building, which is slower, which does require some building of social connection and so on, that is not an immediate thing, has so much potential right now. Because first of all, it's a thing that most people are missing, is social connection and trust and building relationships that are both, that make them both feel alive, but also feel like they have some impact on the rest of the world. They can build together this idea, right? So, part of what we're doing in liminal learning is taking these small groups and spending quite a lot of time proportionally compared to something like a class, and allowing young people themselves to discover, well, first explore and then discover the first twinge of meaning and a sense of little purpose that is just interesting enough to pursue right now in the present moment with the people around them, and to feel what that feels like, so that they can, when they leave us and they're in their larger community of liminal learning, they can keep harvesting the good of that with their fellow friends, right? And I think that's a really different model of education, development, learning, any of that.
Totally. And once you've sort of felt it in community, like this sort of potential between, and the intimacy that's available with shared care for authenticity and for changing and for sort of like pursuing the best of ourselves in whatever way that might is, you're gonna feel it, and then it's gonna be like, okay, there it is. That shit's sacred. Like, that shit is what we are going to, hold and over the year and then and beyond, like really cultivate it and keep each other in contact, and we'll be, the founding members will be about, and this idea of the quest is a way to sort of find that fire, and then the year is just like hold it, remember it, and then utilize it in a way that builds life, builds meaning, builds connections, and it might end up by happenstance, like that could turn into a community that becomes like a non-profit, which becomes so there's on some level we're talking about career choice and things that we can do with our time, but it's circuitous, right? And so much of life is circuitous, right? Like that you'll just be amongst people who feel this thing, and this thing has value and virtue and currency in the world, but it's not the kind of currency like you said about the piece of paper that you can get from a university, right? It's like it's a much more meaningful and surprising, I think, kind of currency that will, and I don't know, like there's no predicting where it might go, but
no, but I think that there is, it is very difficult to box what does personal meaning and collective purpose look like, and how do we point to it. But I do think it would be, and it maybe it's helpful right now to set on the table our model, at least the way where we're starting, right? So, we start with these week-long quests in the middle of the woods with as little technology as possible around us, and hopefully as many moose as possible. And it will be 16 young people between the ages of approximately 18 and 24. So these are people who are just launching into adulthood, right? And the launch for us should feel like a collective launch, that they have peers that have like-minded, they have concerns that they share. And then they've got about 8 to 10, depending on who is going to be up there at Algonquin with us, adults who at least have gone through a couple of these iterations of finding meaning and collective purpose themselves, right? And we go into the woods not because, we're into survival camps and we're going to throw you off of whatever and you're going to have to do trust building things of, catching your friend, but because it is a very reliable, millennia tested method by which we touch what's real, right? And we are able to look at one another and say, can we agree that this tree is here and that we care about that presence of that tree around us? We can calm ourselves physiologically and feel what it feels like to be in nature in a way that many, many young people haven't done that for ever in terms of their own lives. They may have never done it. But also because it's important in the context of where we are right now. One of the things we haven't mentioned yet is that liminal learning is also born into a very specific period of history right now, where we are all feeling the pressure of societal and global crisis, or certainly change, right? So some people call it the meta crisis, some people call it the poly crisis, some people call it, ecological crisis, etc. But certainly a lot of people have been talking about the environmental crisis being at a period where we no longer can look away, and we need young people thinking with us about innovative, very quick, efficient, and genuine ways of making a real difference, unless otherwise we're really deeply screwed in terms of the amount of extraction we've done through the systems that we've been participating in. And what's important about that isn't that we're going to wave this ecological flag so much as to say, how do you even start caring about a planet if you don't know what it feels like to be around trees for more than an hour or two? So we're going to bring those young people there. But the other crises that are part of this meta crisis, et cetera, is the inability for us to talk politics without being so divided that there is no talking. So we all feel that something has gone terribly awry in political systems, right? We also, young people, are very acutely aware of all the technology and the AI especially kind of uprising, and the fact that they can't predict whether they're going to have a career and what kind of career they're going to have. So all of these things coming together means that there's very good reason for this time right now in history to go, there's big transition happening. A lot of people are not arguing that fact. And so what do young people at their own transition developmentally do about this global transition, and how do they fit themselves in? And that's exactly what liminal learning is designed to help young people start thinking. And so the quest there is just, as you well know, is just a launch. It's a launch into our community. It's a launch into the model that we'll be teaching them, which Brian talked a little bit about, which is his sort of philosophical approach that brings millennia of wisdom traditions, Eastern and Western traditions, together. And we'll be teaching young people, but not just on a philosophical level, but how does it apply to their lives right now? And the most important way it applies right now in their lives is so that they can look at the various stories that the world has given them through school, through parenting, all the conventional things that they're should be doing, going to school, making money, having 2.3 kids, etc. And they can think about objectifying those stories a little. First of all, realizing that they are living stories. They're not reality. They're just stories, right? And that they can choose those stories. It will be a lot easier to look at those stories as just that when we are in nature, and that we see that there are other things that are much closer to our reality. And once we look at all of those stories, some of them may be perfectly inspiring and wonderful. There might be young people who are like, I want to take over my dad's business, and this gets me very excited, and these are new ways I'm going to do it. But they will do so by choosing themselves to do it, right? And they'll do it with the echoes of their friends around them that are learning the same way to think about the choices that they're making as an intentional choice. And then they can come up with new stories that they want to follow themselves. And we, as their faculty, or whatever we call ourselves as liminal learners along with them, are going to be able to support those emerging stories that they want to create and bring into the world and create some kind of good in that world. And once they're launched out of the quest, what's very important to note is that it's just the beginning, that we're going to be there with them and for them for the next year at least. We've made the commitment, right? And what's so exciting when I think about, like, Kevin, the ability for these kids to literally call you up and say, dude, you told me about this video thing that I could do. Could you help me out on this? Yeah. We're going to be creating these relationships that are very dear to us and that we want to cultivate. And these young people can come back to liminal learning and continue to build with us what we want to see out into the world, right? Mm-hmm. And so this 1 year commitment is really important because you will be with some of these kids, talking with them. Luke, all the others, we have designers, we have artists, we have writers, we have scientists, different people with very different proclivities and skills that will be able to partner up with these young people and be their best champions for as long as they'll have us in their lives. Okay, I went on way too long, sorry, but I
enjoyed
just
all that. That was great.
Deeply wanted to get that out.
Yeah, no, well played. Well played.
Yeah.
We're hitting about a half hour here. So, So there's about 3 or 4 things that I'd like to riff on, but I think I'm going to try to be a little bit disciplined and not go too far into it. But I can't control myself completely. When we're my sort of baby, my sort of passion thread through this is creativity, and everything you just said in terms of a stance in the world that creativity could offer for young people, reframing the potential of their future and rethinking about the narrative, like, you know, seeing it and then going, oh, it's not real, it's something I can pluck from the universe and I can collectively play with it in conversation. And so that really resonates, and sort of and the ideas of the kind of intimacies that are going to be available. Like you say, you change it, you go into the woods and you change yourself a little bit, you become a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more out of your protective habits of mind. And you're doing that in concert with all these other people who are doing it with there's so much intention just by signing up, by having this sort of wisdom and guts to just come to liminal learning. You've filtered into a group who are able and willing to play that intimacy game with you, and to sort of shift communally. It's really powerful, real powerful potential. And I very much love this idea that it's the long view, right? Like this.
Yes.
I think, like, in my mind sometimes I think about the quest, but you're very wise to continually bring us out of the quest and think about the long narrative, because change is slow. I mean, change is well, it's fast and slow. I think you said that somewhere in one of the things you wrote, like it's fast and slow, like because you can have epiphanies that are really like, holy crap, I've never been that vulnerable and so safe at the same time. It may be something like that. Epiphanies, which, you know, that word speaks of speed, like that our hearts and our guts can like really shift, you know, in sort of quantum chunks.
Yeah.
But then there's this sort of integration over time, and now you have to go home and talk to your parents and your lover and your, you know, and realize I'm a slightly different person, and what does that mean, and how will they accept? And we're there, because Lord knows we've done that, right? Like, we've had to sort of reframe ourselves into the world, right, that we left, and God damn it, that's good work.
Yeah. And I love that, and I love not only are we there, and the thing that, and I love this changes fast and slow. It was actually Rick, and maybe I can talk to him next, because that's exactly how he thinks about it. Is like we have this intense experience with each other, and we have a vision of what we want to do in the world together, and there might be subgroups of people that are, I mean, part of what we would hope that we are seeding is that people connect with one another and are excited about similar projects, and that we can support their projects. And so super important about the integration afterwards, because oftentimes we go to these wonderful experiences, these retreats or camp or something, and we have these amazing experiences of meeting people, and the crash afterwards can be brutal, because of course the rest of the world comes crashing down with the old stories still, right? And so it's not only that we as Liminal Learning have their backs. But what I'm really excited for is all the things I've been doing since I've left academia for 3 years, partnering up with organizations that, for example, give funding to young entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs, or people who have meditation centers that are also into environmental impact and they're activists, or people who have organizations that are nonprofit and for-profit organizations that are there to do political good and so on. Those are us 7 have amazing contacts in that world. And what I'm very, very excited about, you have some of them, all of us have some of them. What I'm amazingly excited about is that when these kids launch back into their own worlds, yes, they can come back to us, and we're going to have series and Zoom series and other things that ways that people can stay connected. But we will also connect them to the nodes out in the world that we know. And so the world suddenly becomes full of possibilities, not this antagonistic, negative, whatever. There's going to be all these potential springboards out there. So I think that's going to be really,
beautiful.
really lovely.
I'm glad you said that, because that image is in my head of this almost like fungus, like we could sort of send this out into the world, and the mycelia of our community can like have fruiting bodies all over the place.
Yes,
and,
totally.
Yeah, I think that's what good lives are made out of. It's out of like if something is like contacts and sort of shared care, and friends that I have and places that I've been. It's like, man, you would really be great working on this set. I have I'm into movie stuff, and I got these guys that are making this film.
Exactly.
If that's a thing that sort of fires you up, man, I know you and I trust you. I think I'll bring my name to these people for you, or something like that.
I love it.
And those things will happen, I think, quite organically.
As opposed to networking. Do you remember that word? I just remember just going, ooh, I don't network. I don't.
Yeah.
What does that mean? That you don't go talking to people? But it's a totally different thing, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Discipline.
Yeah.
Discipline.
Yes. We did it.
We did it, yeah. So you mentioned Rick.
Yes.
And so we're doing this sort of there's a bit of a conceit here where we're handing the baton. So Brian and I talked, and then the baton came to me, and I've had a wonderful conversation with Isabella, and Isabella is going to at some point, it looks like, talk to Rick and and sort of carry on this. And Rick, boy, does Rick have a lot to offer. What a sweetheart of enthusiasm.
Yes,
He is.
enthusiasm and talent and
yeah.
an amazing writer and marketer.
And his
all sorts
care,
of-
his care for this is deeply sweet, I have to say. Like, when he's so
Agreed.
he really an earnest sort of warmth for this project that is palpable when we're on Zoom meetings. And I met him in the woods one time when we got together. So anyways, I don't know him as well as you do, but I know that much.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I can't wait to have the conversation with him, because he's also a visionary. So I think we've got lots and lots to explore with him. So thank you very much, Kevin. This has been awesome.
It was. It's been delightful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit the stop button, and I imagine you will go away magically when I do that.
Okay.
All my love.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye, sweetie.